Hello, folks. Welcome from our home to your home. Everybody's home these days, right? Thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We had to unfortunately reschedule a webinar last week. So if you'd had scheduled last week, you were not able to join, but you're able to join this time. Thank you so much for waiting and coming. I'm here with Susan Handley. Hi, Sue. We're both sharing our webcams as well. Unfortunately, we don't have any cool backgrounds, so you can see our actual backgrounds here, unlike Teams or some other stuff.
You're all white, and you're getting my dining room.
Yeah, a lot going on in the back, that's for sure. What I'm going to do, so if you're okay with that, I'm going to take the presentation for a second, then I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Yeah, all right. Show my... Okay, so actually, I'm going to go to our website for a second here. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. Sue's going to be talking about, as the presentation showed before, the shopping list for your intranet. What do you need for your intranet, right? And we're going to be talking about that. And I have an intranet opened up over here as well. I wanted to take just a minute to just talk about quickly if it makes sense for you to check out VisualSP, the host of the webinar. My name is Asif Rahmani, by the way. I serve as the CEO of VisualSP. This is our website. And I just want to quickly show you a couple of specific use cases that have been pretty helpful these days for people. Can you see my screen, by the way, Sue?
Yeah, although it
Okay.
looks like a team site, not an intranet, but we'll pick on you.
You're right. It is a team site. It's not an intranet site, but let's pretend if it was a regular communication site or something like that.
Sure.
Any intranet. One of the challenges these days is to get information to people, whether it's regular information, training information, whatever it is, to folks as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I don't know about you guys, but my email inbox, if I showed it to you guys right now, is bursting. There's just too much stuff in there and I can't keep track of everything. And that's happening with a lot of people I talk to. Getting information through a fire hose, how do you keep track of everything? My advice has always been to provide information to end users, to employees in the context of their own environment. So when I'm looking at this team site, any page for that matter, document library or whatever else, provide me information here. So for example, let me see if I got my annotation here. See inline help right there, operations. So this is an inline help that was created using VisualSP. If I click on this as a user, I could see, okay, in this particular case, I know because I'm an editor, it's asking me if you want to make a new page, you click on new and then click on page. And from here, I can click make a new page. This inline help specifically was placed here. Obviously, it could be placed anywhere on the screen. I'll quickly show it to you how that was. And I'll do one more thing and then we'll get going with the webinar as well. This is our editor on the back end. This is where you select the actual element that you want. So here we go. Here's how I placed it there. You can make it a different color or whatever else as well, but keeping it very, very specific and in their face, in the user's face, I think is very important. As Sue and I have talked about many times. So inline helps is one component. You want to keep that in mind. And second component, which I find to be very helpful, especially in these challenging times, is getting information to people a bit, I don't want to say forcefully, but much more in their face when they're first coming to a site or something, saying, you know what, here's a message from the CEO, or here's a message you should know about. For example, I had made something over here, didn't complete over here, but wash your hands. Something we should all be doing these days, but something like that comes up a dialog box automatically. Or comes up in a different interaction point on the page. Those kind of things, much more important these days, more than even before, to get this in the environment of the user instead of through the email inbox, which has become much more difficult. So if you want to learn more about all this stuff, check out visualsp.com and let us know if you have any questions. And now turning it over to you, Sue, to talk about the intranet shopping list. That super interested in learning about it myself as well, to exactly see what you have to say about what do we need for an intranet.
Sure.
I'll pass it over to you.
Make sure that's going to work. Hopefully you see my screen.
I'll let you know. Yep, I can see it. Your intranet shopping list.
Great. All right. So let's talk about what are the things that everyone's intranet really should have. And I'm going to begin with a rather sobering fact. 90% of intranets fail to achieve their initial goals. That's pretty sobering, and I want to make sure that we explore ways that we can make sure that that doesn't happen in your organization. So my first tip is, when you're talking about intranets, is don't think about the intranet. Don't even ask about the intranet. Ask about the business. The most important things we need to know now and always is, what are the big rocks for our organization? What are the key elements of our organizational strategy? How do we measure success? To be successful with an intranet, you really need to be able to drive business value. So you want to think about the technology. Before you even think about the technology, think about the business outcome. This actually was brought home to me about an hour ago when my son called frantically saying, my boss wants us to do something where we have to share externally with an external partner, and she told me I have to do it by moving my Google Drive, but where I work, we've blocked external sharing. I'm like, honey, stop. You need to find out what is the outcome she's trying to achieve. Don't let her describe how she wants you to achieve it. Ask her to explain what she wants to get to, and then you say, I will find a way to make it work that is compliant with what our IT rules are so that we can achieve this outcome. So what I said to him is what I tell everybody: ban the R word. Talk about outcomes. No more requirements. Talk about outcomes. So it's the big picture that really matters. A successful intranet, they tend to have some common elements. The most important is a clear vision about what we're trying to accomplish. And that really needs to be wrapped in the business strategy. You need a governance plan. You need to understand what governance means in your organization, and people who are accountable and responsible for the intranet need to understand that that's part of their role. One of the things that I see often helps contribute to intranet failures is that we have this aspirational goal that everybody is going to manage their content and it's going to be beautiful and perfect, and everyone will be, and angels will be singing and bells will be ringing. And the problem is that although we want people to take accountability for their content, we don't actually make that part of their job description, nor do we give them the time to make that happen. And so all of this really needs to be factored into play in order to be successful. The other thing about successful intranets is that they're not just about news. People come to the intranet not with a box of popcorn to sit there and watch that scrolling video or scrolling rotating news articles. They're really coming to get work done. And the best intranets really focus on that. They recognize that you don't have a lot of time. You need to come in, get the information you need, make a decision, take an action, fill out whatever is required to fill out, and get back to your day. So successful intranets are task-oriented, and more these days, they also give us an opportunity to extend beyond the task and to include collaborative capabilities such as Yammer communities, especially things like executive engagement. Yammer communities are super popular in all kinds of organizations. So at the end of the day, we need a commitment to keep our intranet useful, usable, and up to date. And that also means recognizing that the content needs to be specific to me. In the past, we typically have what I would call traditional intranets, where communication is by email or corporate news or the dreaded FAQ. By the way, if you have to have a lot of FAQs on your intranet, it means your content sucks, because I shouldn't need an FAQ if you're communicating to me correctly. So traditional intranets have a department-based structure, and a modern intelligent intranet is not just based on corporate news. We have targeted news. We have opportunities to connect and collaborate. Instead of being tied to the org chart, which is the one thing we know will change, experiencing the intranet is designed to your role or a task or a microservice that the organization provides. And instead of just thinking websites, what we really are thinking about in the modern intelligent intranet is providing a collection of experiences. And if that hasn't convinced you that it's time to go, if you're now ready to jump into your modern intelligent intranet, the first thing you probably want to do is get rid of your digital garbage.
Oh, yeah.
Today is trash day, right? This is a good time to get rid of all that junk. In fact, My migration strategy is all content left behind. Every single item that you want to put on your new intranet should be, you should be able to ask it, and maybe you're not going to hold it up and say, do you spark joy? But you should be able to say, are you adding value? Are you helping our organization accomplish a task, create a goal, or accomplish a goal and get work done? So this is a really good time when you're thinking about making your shopping for your new intranet capabilities. It's a really good time to first take out the trash. So clean before you migrate. So I care passionately about governance. And the one thing I will tell you is before you go anywhere with your journey in Microsoft 365, it's a really good time to think about governance. Governance at the root involves a couple of core decisions. Who can provision a site is probably one of the most important decisions that you're going to make. Just remember that if you block things and you make it too difficult, people will find a way to work around. So shadow IT doesn't happen because we in IT are aligned with the business. Shadow IT happens because we're the department of no. And nobody in
So
your
true.
organization, when they need to get work done, is going to take no for an answer. So governance is about making sure that we've made these decisions, that we've thought very carefully about the problem my son was having, about sharing internally and externally. And the big problem his boss was having was that she wanted to create a place to share externally. And the current approach that they were using is blocked at corporate from external sharing. So he needs to find a better way, but he needs to do it within the context of IT. And he says, hey, Mom, do you know a good SharePoint consultant? I said to him, look, I'm happy to help you do it, but first call IT and find out how that business problem gets solved within their corporate governance. This is he works for a rather large corporation, and I promise you they have governance in play. So you want to focus also about content management. If you're going to make your brand new intranet, you need a commitment. So it's got to be part of someone's role. So governance really is about balancing risk with outcomes. If you lock things down too much, you know that people are going to work around. But if we work together to plan what we need aligned with the business, we have a much better opportunity to be successful. So a lot of times I've heard people say, well, Sue, if I knew what governance questions to ask, I would be much further along. Well, that's good because I can help you there. And I have been tracking, I used to call them SharePoint and Office 365 governance questions. I need to make a new screenshot because it is actually called Microsoft 365 governance questions right now. And the scope that you'll find at that URL is way beyond SharePoint alone. It covers almost all of the collaborative services in Microsoft 365. It starts your journey on Teams. I break up my world to be decisions that you need to make right away before you open the floodgates, and then decisions that you can make later on so that you can really plot your governance journey from that ongoingly up. I don't know if that's the right word, but I update this document all the time. You can find the latest version always by that link or by going to my website where you will learn when was the last time Sue updated it. And I've got pretty much every other weekend I'm redoing that document. Then I don't want to write a governance plan because guess what? I've learned people don't read pretty much anything you write down if it's more than 2 pages. So I recommend that you follow the second link and learn how to create a site, a website, a SharePoint site in which to deliver your governance content rather than your governance document. And in that document, I talk about sort of how to create a series of journeys in which your organization can explore your how should to align with the Microsoft how-to. And to make Asif happy, there are slides about VisualSP to show you how to take the content that you'll craft here, wire it in to VisualSP so you can use VisualSP to deliver how-to plus how should in a consistent experience right at the point of where people need it. So just in time, just when people actually need to know, hey, I'm about to upload a document. What should I know about it?
I learned this the hard way myself, so you and I go way back, and you remember how it was before and how it is right now. we kept on failing, to be honest, with letting people go to a governance document or go to some information, have a destination. It just never works. So you have to deliver it in line. And that's why
Right.
the whole company was born, the product was
Yep.
born.
And we've talked about that a lot. So,
Right.
people learn when they have a reason to learn, and they need
Yes.
to, and you need to deliver that content in a format that works for them. And although video is super popular and I love creating that content in video, I'm also very concerned about accessibility. That's
Mhm.
it's my mission for 2019 and 2020. And I just wrote a blog post for the Humans of IT blog and the Microsoft Tech community to share the things that I've been learning on how to make sure that my SharePoint content is more accessible. And from a learning perspective, video is awesome, but you have to remember that not everyone works in an environment, well, right now we all do, where they can play video. But when we hopefully get back to the office, we can't always play a video, and not everyone can hear. And you need a transcript that go along with your video, and even the transcript might be awkward for a screen reader to read it. So you really want to think about who am I creating content for,
Mhm.
and how can I make that content as inclusive as possible. So that's actually it's a little sidebar, and I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and I'm going to the fourth tip.
I'm going to
You
ask
know,
you a hard question.
yeah.
Can I do that on behalf of everybody? Because I've heard this before. Is governance a hard and scary word? Could there
Well,
be a different? Mhm.
yeah, so if you want another G word that works just as well, think of it as guidance. So governance, I've actually had to work with organizations where they've banned the word governance because it's so hard and scary. Pick another word. I create my governance content in a place that I call a user resource center. Completely stole that name from a client. I used to call it help because that's kind of what it is. But again, governance is about helping me get my work done in a compliant way. It's
Mhm.
not about telling me you can't do that, or it really shouldn't be, because when governance is about no, then people are going to find a way to work around. Give someone a wall and they'll find a way to break through it when they need to get work done. And that's really our job in IT, is to work, just to partner with the business to ensure that the restrictions that we're putting in place are necessary and explained. And if people understand why they can or cannot do something, if they understand the value of that constraint to the business, they're much more likely to be able to accept and follow that guideline because they understand why they're doing it. So, I've long believed that if we treat everybody like they know something and like they're adults, that we're going to get adult behavior out of them. So, all right. So you need to plan the journey of your intranet. And one of the ways we do that is with navigation. So navigation is a journey, and so is your site architecture. And as you're defining the architecture of your intranet, remember that to design in an effective way, we're going to do a little top down, because planning and navigation might mean creating hubs and connecting sites, but we're also going to have to do a little bottom up, because in the world of modern intranets, the world is flat. Every concept, every unit of work gets their own site. And because of that, we're going to need to figure out how to tell that site story. We're going to have lots of them. Get over it. We're going to have lots of them. The way we connect those sites is part of what we plan in our navigational journey. The most important thing we need to know when we're doing that is, for whom are we creating the journey and what do they need to know? And we want to do, that outcome gathering that we did. Notice I didn't say requirements gathering. That outcome gathering, we want to use the insights that we gained to help plan that navigational journey. And while we may end up having to represent some version of the org chart in our navigation, that should not and cannot be the only navigational story for the intranet. And I don't care what tool you use to document your navigation, but you should do something in which you can get some feedback. My personal favorite is Mind Manager, because I love the ability to expand and contract and send out an HTML file to the person who needs to look at it, but you can do it. I often take my Mind Manager map when I'm happy with it and I dump it into PowerPoint or Visio, Or, you can use Excel. Excel is really nice because it gives you a visual way to represent your mega menus. And that's also a nice tool that you can use, not because you can't do this directly in SharePoint, you can, but because you want to have a conversation before you're too far down the road. And so I like to do one round of planning in paper. Maybe that's because I'm old. And then get feedback and then immediately build it out. What you call those labels really, really matter. Navigation labels matter. In fact, my favorite quote from a well-known information architect is if most navigation labels were married, they'd be getting divorced because they rarely keep their promises.
Oh my God.
Every time you label something, you are making a promise to the reader. Don't invent terms, and for God's sakes, avoid learn more, click here, abandon that use. You need to make sure that you are really telling people, giving people a meaningful destination. I worked with an organization where they decided that the appropriate name for all things related to life and career was people on the job. And when I did usability testing there, and by the way, I did it 4 years in a row, so longitudinal studies, people in the first year had no clue what people on the job meant. And when they figured it out by year 2, and we have people think aloud when we're doing usability studies, they were reading, they were visualizing people on the job when the task was something like find your pay stub. And they would say, as they were clicking it, HR. So don't invent terms. That would be my advice to you.
Concise, simple, transparent. Love it. That's what you
Yeah,
want to do.
yeah. All right, so now you're gonna ask me, I get that we have navigation in 2 places in modern SharePoint right now, today, operative word today. Today we have local navigation on each flat site. The world is flat. You're gonna have a site for each concept, each topic, each department, each sub-department, each little function that a department provides might get their own site. We're going to string the content. We're going to have navigation on the local site. And if there's family of sites that we want to hook together, we're going to use hubs. But you may say, when you're looking at sort of the Nielsen Norman 10 best intranets of fill in the blank year or any of those other intranet awards, you're going to say, yeah, but every intranet I look at has global navigation. And by that, I mean persistent navigation telling the entire story of your intranet on every page in the site. Well, we don't have that yet in Office 365, but I'm going to challenge you to think about something. First of all, I am on Team Global Navigation, 100%. I want it too. However, and while I do think we do need to provide this overall table of contents, if you will, overall story architecture for our intranet, I don't know whether I totally believe it must be on every single page. So think about it this way. Could we create a navigator site that, oh, by the way, happens to be the landing site for the intranet? And if you're lucky enough to have the home site in your tenant, maybe it's your home site. Have the navigation on that site. Wire up your logo in the suite bar to point to that site. Now you have something that gives you are persistently 1 click away from global navigation. And is that going to work until we get global navigation? The other thing you can do if you desperately want global navigation is you can write it with a SharePoint framework extension, or you can buy it from people who offer global navigation add-ons. And you could also use an intranet in a box solution, and most of them actually support some form of global navigation. So you have options, and even if you are using the native SharePoint suite, I wonder if we could potentially wait, because we do know that global navigation is top of mind for Microsoft. That was talked about and telegraphed at Ignite in 2019. And Microsoft very rarely puts things formally on the roadmap that aren't somewhere in the currently actively thinking about it future. So even if I knew something, which I might, and I wouldn't be saying anything, which I won't, I can tell you that Microsoft has heard all of us and our big wish list, and I know they are thinking about it. But I'm going to basically say I think maybe we can wait. Maybe we can find something else to spend our calories on. So the other thing I'm sure you're thinking about in your modern intranet is planning how sites are going to be connected. And I think the other tip I would make for your modern intranet is to think about hubbing before you sub. And I think there's basically 3 models for hubification, and I'll share that in the a minute how I think about that. One of the things we've been asking for is this concept of, can I connect hubs to other hubs? And Microsoft calls that associated hubs. And that was announced at Ignite, and we should be seeing that relatively soon. But remember that a site can belong to one and only one hub. So you can only be part of one family at a time. And what I ask the people I work with to think about is, how many members are in that family? Because if it's a small number, we may not need a hub. Why do we need that hub experience? Because one of the biggest benefits of a hub for me, is a shared search scope. Shared navigation for 3 sites that aren't, when you're not expanding that relationship, you can do that pretty easily, and it's pretty easy to maintain. If you have an actively growing collection of family members, it would be very challenging to manually duplicate that navigation in every single site. But you have some options, and we are going to get this gift. When you think about how you're going to hub, you can think about hub being either functional, so that's the HR example. I've never worked in an organization that doesn't have at least this many concepts that they work on. Larger organizations divide these into departments, and there's completely different people with completely different permissions. In smaller organizations, we might actually represent these concepts in pages, because the same 2 or 3 people maintain all of them. And in that case, maybe an HR hub doesn't make sense. But in a larger and growing organization, you're almost always going to need more than one site to represent HR. And that's a great function to be a hub. The other model for hubs is either geography or location. So imagine a site representing a country. So Austria, I work in a large global organization right now, and we've got a very large presence in Austria. Austria has their own HR, legal, finance, procurement, and quality department. Because a site can belong to one and only one hub, we are thinking bigger picture. What are the user experiences we're trying to enable for people who work in Austria? When they come to the Austria main site, they are expecting to be able to find all the content that they need when they're searching, and they're also expecting it to be in German. And so the model that we're using for HR is that global HR is a hub and Austria is a hub. Austria HR is aligned to the Austria hub, not global HR. If we want to show a relationship that there are location-based HR sites, and in fact we do in this organization, we make a navigational link in the global HR hub to point to the local HR sites. And when we're on the global HR hub, we can navigate to the Austria HR, but we're not searching the Austria HR content, because it actually wouldn't give us the right user experience. So we're planning our hubs based on how we want our users to experience the intranet. So we are experience focused, not org chart focused. And I think that's an important distinction as you're planning your architecture. The third model for hubification is what I call the portfolio model. So imagine that you're a consulting firm and you do a lot of work with one particular client. And that client, let's just say hypothetically, because this is a real story, is a government agency. And that agency has a contracting representative and specific templates that you need to use for every deliverable that you submit to them. Be great to have a communication site for that client relationship where all that content is managed and maintained, and then all of the various projects that you work for that agency can then be associated to that comm site. And if you have access, if you're on the team, it's a great way to navigate. But what you do have is it makes it much easier for you to get that universal content that is shared for that client relationship. across the board. So you can think of it as a client or a program or any sort of portfolio of sites or portfolio of projects or portfolio of initiatives that you want to connect and experience in a single search scope, shared navigation, and all the other superpowers that hubs have. If all you want to do is roll up news, you don't need a hub to do that because any site can roll up news from any other site. So we do have that superpower in news. All right, so another thing to think about when you're planning your intranet is metadata. Not as tasty as cupcake wars, and honestly, I've seen a lot of metadata wars in organizations. You do want to think about, before you go too far down the line, is there enterprise metadata that you can manage at the enterprise level and keep in your enterprise taxonomy, which is the managed metadata service? I'm really delighted that Microsoft has finally announced an update, a long-awaited update to the managed metadata service to make it more user-friendly, to make it easier to add content, and to make it much more able to deal with standard industry taxonomies. That modernization was going on anyways, but Project Cortex kind of threw a, hey, you guys better get this done quickly, because Project Cortex uses the managed metadata service to keep an index of all the topics that it's tracking and creating and its wonderful knowledge networks. So I think you ought to be thinking about what kind of content might you need at an enterprise level, because you can then manage and maintain that data in one place, but you're also going to help prep your organization for content type, for Project Cortex. The other sort of big announcement that just came out is that the always problematic content type hub is moving to the admin center and will be able to explore and leverage content types much in the same way that we're going to manage and maintain our enterprise metadata, and get the ability to say, hey, everybody in this hub shares this content type. So it'll be a much more efficient way of dealing with shared metadata, shared terms, and shared content types. There's a lot of different ways you can do this today. You can use the legacy content type hub. You can use a site design that makes a copy of a content type. Doesn't help you from maintaining it, but it does help you make sure that you're using the same exact content type GUID in every single site. Or you can just hang on a teeny bit until the modern content type hub is available in your tenant. So lots of different ways to think about that. And if you're going to use any type of shared metadata, here is the most important lesson that I've learned when it comes to metadata. You need to plan on training, lots of it. And then you need to refresh people about what it means to leverage managed metadata. And did I mention that people actually really need training? So this is a concept that's been really difficult to explain, partially because the user interface requires a PhD in managed metadata in order to use it. But now that it's not going to require that, it's still going to take some work to help users understand, if they're going to use it in their local sites, how to use it effectively. In many cases, if you are going to sort of jump on the Project Cortex bandwagon, one of the benefits of that investment is that you are not going to harm any humans in the tagging of your content, that you'll be able to take advantage of the AI in Project Cortex to add that metadata automatically. However, you still need the taxonomy, and one way to prep for Project Cortex, whether you're going to go there or not, is to build out your managed metadata. So one of the things kind of in the intranet planning, typically search is like the redheaded stepchild. We kind of just expect search to work, and we don't invest any time in thinking about search experiences. So I think the other thing you should think about in your shopping list for an intranet is what do people need to do, and what can I do with search today? And where is search going, and what do I need to know about? So planning search, determining sort of what level of investment you want to make. You can use modern search out of the box. You can configure modern search to do some super cool things like bookmarks and locations and Q&A and acronyms. And then you also have the ability to create a custom search experience for those parts of your intranet where being able to find content by content type or by metadata refiner kind of thing is more important to you. That capability is available. Whether you choose to use it depends on your understanding of the outcomes people want to achieve in their search experiences. And so you're not going to know that unless you start with, unless you make search a full-fledged member of your intranet planning task list. So I am a huge fan of the home site. I have it in my tenant, and it used to have a superpower that they took away that I'm very disappointed about. And the superpower that the home site used to have was that any navigation you set up in your home site carried through to the SharePoint start page. And that gives you another entry point for global navigation. Well, for a variety of reasons, Microsoft decided to revert the modern SharePoint start page back to the legacy SharePoint start page. And when that happened, we lost that capability. I believe it's going to come back. I know who's in charge of that service, and he did tell me it's in the backlog. But for now, your navigation that you put on your home site is only for the home site. It won't carry forward to the SharePoint start page. That was another way you could kind of cheat your way to global navigation, because clicking SharePoint start would give you what I call your navigator site. But that doesn't mean we still don't want a landing experience for our intranet. And I think there's kind of 8 important roles for that landing page. My colleague James Robertson at step 2 defines 7. And the 8th one that I think is critically important is that landing page should be about me. Well, not just about me. It can be about you too. But when you and I go to the landing page, if it's just blah, blah, blah from corporate, we're not necessarily going to feel like the intranet is ours. It feels very much like a them. And what we also want to think about is how can we create some personalized experiences that show that someone has really been thoughtful about what I need for my job and has made it easier for me to get there. And I think you want to think about what's important to your organization and how these elements may be more or less important depending on what your key corporate goals are. So I do want the page to look really good. I used to be really focused on content, because I'm an information architect, didn't really care about how it looks. But what it really turns out is the page actually needs to look really beautiful, but value is, I like to say it's more important. Business value is clearly more important, but it has to look good as well as deliver great experiences. I do want you to say on the main homepage of your intranet, you're going to go all Marie Kondo on that and ask each little element, do you spark joy? Have you earned the right to be on the homepage of the intranet? What business value are you representing? Who needs you and why are you here? Because no one comes back to your intranet because it looks good. They come back because they get value. I mean, they may say, oh, wow, this looks really beautiful. And if you want some really good examples to have of an intranet or of what you can do in SharePoint that really looks good, you want to take a look at the lookbook, lookbook.microsoft.com. Now, what I would tell you is that this kind of an experience that you can download from the lookbook looks good. But if you don't have this kind of content and you have no commitment to maintain it and you haven't thought about what's important to your organization, I don't care how pretty it is, they're still not going to come back. So what you need to do is be inspired by the lookbook. That's what I love about the lookbook. It helps me see the art of the possible, but then I have to translate that to the art of the practical so that I know what, and I have to rationalize all of this with what's really important to the organization that I'm working with. Because again, you want to, nobody has an unlimited amount of time or budget. And I think we do want to think about how are we going to spend those important and very limited dollars in an important way. So for me, the home site and the home page really should be a balance of me and us. And one of the things you'll notice in the example is that this example uses the vertical column the relatively new vertical column for a personalized experience. So everything off to the left is the us content, and that vertical column is me. And I think about it as, Corp Comms owns the left, but the me column is really targeted to me. And I
Love
think
that.
what's
Yeah.
really nice about this layout, by the way, is adding the vertical column doesn't take away from the page real estate that was previously allocated to us content. So there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot you should think about. And so you have these great opportunities, and the home site has these wonderful superpowers. It lost my favorite superpower, but I'm assured it is going to come back. And your home entry point for your intranet and the home site is really designed to support these critically important goals for your intranet. Connecting the workplace with intelligent search, showcasing news and information, making content personal, incorporating that community and connections, sharing compelling content, and creating this beautiful dynamic experience that also is all about business value. And I talk about training because, that's kind of important too. I may have mentioned that once or twice. I think that one of the things I've learned in my side hustle, I am a judge of what I call an intranet beauty pageant. So the Step 2 Internet Design Awards, the judging actually closes tomorrow. So fortunately, I turned in everything I was supposed to judge, saw some really crazy cool things. And what I get to take a look at every year when I'm judging is intranets that people are really, really proud of. And it's really cool to see what people are proud of. One of the things I've noticed is that these award-winning intranets, the ones I judge and the ones I read about in the Nielsen Norman Award, all have some things that they do to help people do the right thing. They have page templates so that you're not starting from scratch every time. They use site designs that include links to training content, that when you create a new site, you're not going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do here? They've got libraries of examples and patterns and guidelines that you can follow. And I think that's really important. Now, remember, there's a lot of training that you can view if you consume the Microsoft Learning Pathways site. You can also deliver all that very same content in context if you apply, if you use VisualSP, because even the free one, right, Asif, like basically gives you the same content as the Learning Pathways site, but in context
Absolutely.
where you are. So I would actually say that it's the same content. I would rather have it in context than as a destination. But either way, you have this opportunity to bring help to people just in time, just where they need it. And then there's one other thing as part of my mission to help people architect great sites is that I also have created a communication site planning guide. Coming soon from Microsoft is an entire collection of I think it's going to be both an ebook and a document, like standard docs.com experience that is basically everything you need to know about planning and creating a fantastic communication site. And I know about it because I just finished writing it, and it's now in editorial mode. The docs team at Microsoft, they are spectacular writers. And so they're going to take what I gave them and make it really beautiful. But there's a lot of great sort of thinking concepts. So one of the things that Microsoft is really trying to do is make sure that their documentation isn't just how to do something, but also why and best practice and how to think about it. And I've really had a great time working on, I first finished all the modern intranet content. That's all being updated as we speak. And then I just finished the communication site planning guide. And my next task is governance. So
Got your hands full.
I do, and it's sort of like writing down all the things I probably should have done a long time ago. So it's great that someone wants me to do it, and it's going to get a place to get out there in the world. So I'm really happy and excited about that. So, I mean, things that everybody in the organization needs to know. The one gift that I think you can give your colleagues, it's even more important now that we're all dispersed, is teaching people how to search. You teach someone how to search, and you're giving them a gift for life, because all of the search sort of little things like using the wildcard to expand your search, using capital O, capital OR to ensure that you're finding cats or dogs, Or if you want both cats and dogs, capital A, capital N, capital D. All those little tricks that work in SharePoint also work in Bingle, either of the search engines of your choice, so Google or Bing. And so teaching someone how to find content more effectively, find and discern authoritative content is another story. But on your intranet, I'm going to assume that your content is authoritative and that you're not allowing people to upload documents that for the intranet that have .v1, .v2, .final, .really final, .this time I mean it. I mean, the number one governance decision you need to make is how are we naming our files? And you need to ban versioning and dates in files that get updated a lot. Org chart May 2019 is going to be obsolete on basically the day you publish it. So org chart that you update constantly, if that's what you're using, no links to that are ever going to break because you're using SharePoint versioning to deprecate the prior version and overlay the new one. Probably know a lot about that because I have been preaching this for the last 3 days with a client. Yeah, so I do this all the time. So anyways, so you want to make sure that people know sort of file naming best practices, search. You want to help people know how to update their profile. How do I add a picture? I can't tell you how many organizations I'm in where people still have that gray silhouette in their Office 365 profile. Put your picture in, then we can see you. And every time we create a little people card about you somewhere in SharePoint, we not only have all your contact information, we know who you are. And if we happen to run into you when we ever get to go back to work in offices, we'll know that we've been talking to you all the time. So anyways, we want to give everybody that kind of training. Here's a list that you can see in the slides that Asif will share with you. Sort of the kind of things I've found are particularly helpful for site owners. So you don't only want to train people, give them, I actually think training is about making people comfortable. And I do want to deliver training just in time. But what I've learned is that a lot of people really like the opportunity to either take a class where they can interact, either in person or online, and they use this just-in-time delivery content to supplement what they learn, not as a replacement for real-time training, but as a supplement to real-time training. And if you can afford to do both, I think you're going to catch more of the learners in your organization. Because the one thing we do know about learning is that everybody has sort of a different methodology that works best for them. I am a kinesthetic learner, so if I don't touch and try something myself, I will not remember it. But if I can associate physical space with what I learn, I don't ever forget anything. And you can ask my family about that. They don't love that superpower. So anyways, so again, as I mentioned earlier, I've gotten to judge all of these wonderful sites, and there are these consistent things that seem to be in the sites that we tend to recognize as the top or the best that we've seen. So ways to find people, ways to book travel. Oh my God, that is such an interesting concept because in many organizations, travel reports to a different place. And if you're new to an organization, I have one client where travel is the responsibility of the supply chain department, another where it belongs to finance, and another where it belongs to HR. If I'm new to the organization and your intranet is organized by org chart, I'm never going to be able to book a trip. And so think about experiences. And so organizations that think about the before, during, and after travel experience are also creating content that are really helpful. Having a leadership blog that is in fact a real blog, so you can do it, not a flog, that's a fake blog written by marketing. A leader that engages, you can do that by giving them a SharePoint site, which we've done a lot because SharePoint pages have comments built right in, or we do Yammer communities for executive engagement, and those are all very, very successful. So lots of really great things that you can do to keep the organization connected, which is even more important in the situation that we're living in right now. The other thing you should think about, and that the award winners all seem to do, is to celebrate both the launch and major milestones. And while I'm not going to try and play these are two of my favorite videos, intranet launch videos or relaunch videos that you can find on the public intranet. Ellen Van Aken in the Netherlands has collected, just like I collect governance ideas, she collects intranet promotion videos. And that I've got referenced here, that's really current. She adds things all the time. And so, you know, the hardest thing about creating a launch video or a launch program is writing the script. Well, you can totally steal some of these. And, you know, some of them are super high budget, like the two that you'll get a chance to look at. And then others are clearly shot with someone's iPhone, but so creative that they're pretty engaging. And, you know, people will watch 2-minute videos. There's also a bunch that I've seen, some of which I can't share, where people have made music videos, like written songs about their intranet video, that because the people in the video work for the organization and people know them, they're doubly adorable and super, super cute and really effective. And the other thing you can do is kind of launch activities. This one happened a while ago, and I just thought it was such a great idea. So as part of the launch of their intranet, they were creating people profiles. This is from Penn State. And they created a campaign where they put signs up all around the campus with things like, who's only 2 degrees from Kevin Bacon, and who taught Carlos Santana how to waltz. So giving people essentially a scavenger hunt task to do on the intranet. Before they did this, they obviously asked people what their secret talent was, and had those people who had really cool secret talents publish them on the internet. And I just thought this was such a clever way to learn more about the people that you work with. And so I've gone through 12. I'm going to give you a baker's dozen of tips. And the last tip really is to plan for change, because a good intranet is never done. And you need to think about, how are we going to make sure that we keep on top of what's changing in Microsoft 365? What needs to be updated in our governance and our training content? Do we need to engage, I totally recommend this, a champions program across the organization so that we can spread the knowledge by using people who are local to each office, each geography, or each work team who have basically signed up because they're interested. We communicate to them and then they tell their colleagues. And so building a champions program gives us an interested and engaged audience in which to share both the responsibility for keeping on top of things and the dissemination of that really wonderful knowledge. So I know we're a couple minutes left. So, you know, today's shopping lists are mostly about toilet paper, but for our intranet, we have some other things to think about to just wrap it all up. Don't think about the intranet, think about the business. Governance should come first if you can. There's a journey, both in terms of planning how people experience the intranet and how you're building your experiences. Try a navigator site if we don't have global nav. Think about hubs and how you want to organize them. Plan your metadata. You won't regret that. Think about search. Make it not the redheaded stepchild. Plan that initial experience and think about what that home experience can drive for your users. Don't leave training off the table. Make sure that you celebrate all the great achievements that you're going to have. Look at that list of things that all the award winners seem to do and say, hey, should we be having this as well? Use those reports, by the way. They're well worth buying, because even though they're a couple $100s each, the inspirational ideas that you will take from them, you can't copy any of them. You won't want to. None of them will be copyable, but the level of inspiration that you'll get by saying, oh my God, I never thought about that. Or, oh, I like how they organized that to move forward and how they engage their users to keep their content up to date. That's what I love about these reports, and I think they're well worth every penny. And finally, remember that the most important thing about your intranet journey is that it's never over. And if you can follow all of these tips, I think you're going to have 100% of your intranet meets or exceeds your expectations.
Wow, lots of good content. So for everybody who's been asking before in the webinar, we definitely are going to make this available on our website, visualsp.com, including the presentation slide deck. Thank you very much for providing that too, Sue, as well as we'll putting it on YouTube as well. There's so much good content in here. There's no way we can remember everything. I'm sure everybody's got to watch it twice or 3 times before they can consume it, even half of what you've said so far. So this is good, really, really good stuff. There's been some questions too. If you don't mind, I can ask some of them.
I would love to hear the questions.
So, one that actually came in a bit before by Kevin, he had asked about, can you explain to someone who is still on-prem why SharePoint Online is all about a flat structure now? I don't get it. Seems like a big or unorganized mess.
So there's a lot of problems with the S word, subsites. I'm just going to give you a few. I say subsites, 99 problems, and subsites are most of them. Here's the problem. We used to design intranets, and I'm totally guilty of this, where we would have an organizational site at the top, and then we would have all the subsites below. And then what will happen is there's main one, and then there's one for each department, and then there's sub-departments. And then what happens is org changes. And now that department needs to go over here. Everybody linking to all of that content, everything breaks when you move it. What if the department above, because I've seen, with multiple levels of structure, the department above doesn't exist anymore, but there is a baby below it that needs to live. The baby has nothing to do with the department. How did we get that baby? Because IT provisioned the main top level site. Then someone was able to provision, then they turned it over to some other team member in the business to create the next level site. And now, because you asked if you have permissions to create a site, could you create a
Yeah.
site for me? Nothing to do with your organization, but would you do it? Oh, yes, Sue, I love you. Of course I'll do that for you. Well, now we've got all these things that have nothing to do with each other that are dependent on a physical hierarchy. And the one thing I can guarantee will happen in your organization, within maybe in a couple of days, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 15 minutes, or the hour we've been on this call, is that things are going to change.
Oh
The
yeah.
new flat world is designed to support the way organizations work. And it feels like, I would actually say that the mess is in subsites and unpacking all the subsites. And I'm doing that actually with a client right now. She didn't even know that the site that she wants to replace is a grandchild site, because no one uses the parent, the siblings, or the grandparent. So there are, in this collection, we found 25 dead sites and
Yikes.
one at the level, at the below level that is actually critical. It is, of course, using lists, lookup lists at the grandparent level. And so this is a really impossible, very challenging solution to modernize because of the nested physical hierarchy. So my answer is ban the S word, ban the R word, and the world is flat, and that will allow you to not only support your business today, but going forward as well.
And I think as what you've said before also, and you've said many times, I've heard you, that hub before you sub. So it's not like the hierarchy is going to be gone completely. You can still have the hierarchy, the relationships, but just you're doing it a different way. The model has changed.
Yeah, you're representing it in a navigational
Right.
structure, not in a physical structure. And that's really the danger of subsites, is the physical connections make it difficult to move forward or stay on top of what we know is going to be changing in the organization.
Exactly. Mergers,
Yeah.
acquisitions, department changes, and all that stuff. All, it happens all the time. It's going to happen even more. So yes, completely agree. All right, here's another one.
Question
Uh,
though.
yeah, really good question. Thank you, Kevin. Another one here from Steve here. People live in folders since mass migration from shared drives. How do you get people to migrate to metadata?
Well, first I'm going to say something. I don't hate folders. I know there's been this long-standing thing about consultants will tell you never, never, never use folders in SharePoint. Get over it. Folders are fine. No kittens are going to die if you use folders. Where you start having sick and unhealthy kittens is when you've got nested folders that are going 3, 4, 5 levels deep.
Yep.
Keep your folders. I promise you, I'm not going to yell at you. No one's going to get mad. And if anyone tells you that folders are bad, they're wrong. Try making a Microsoft team. Make a team. You're going to get a subfolder in your shared
Yep.
document library. Get over it. They're fine. It's nested folders that are really a challenge. I'd rather you create more libraries and no more than one and at most 2 levels deep of folders. So rather than having someone rather than taking a metaphor that has worked for years, that people are used to, and they understand, I say, let's live with folders, but let's remind people of why folders are so hard. I put something in a folder 2 years ago. I have no idea where I put it. So I find it somehow, and then I put it someplace else. Now we have 2 versions, same document, same name, and we have no idea which one is actually the most current. I send you a document, you put it in your folder. I've created 17 other versions of it. You still have the old one. So there's all kinds of challenges with burying our content in multiple layers of folders. But folders and metadata can also work together. So what I would say is you're not required to use metadata at all. However, if you store things like your product list and your major project list and things that you want to share across the organization in your managed metadata service, it just means that you don't have to maintain that information and waste the time and energy of all kinds of people maintaining something that one department clearly knows about. And if we get them to maintain it, that one place to maintain will propagate everywhere. So I wouldn't say you must use metadata. I actually, on a team site, I think metadata is a losing battle. People are, and they're really, where's the impact? Small team of people, 5 people, 10 people, if they know where their content is in their folders and they're happy with it and that's part of their whole collaboration contract with each other, go for it. But on a communication site where the idea is that this is the foundation of your intranet and people need to be able to find what they need in the context that they need, burying that content deep in a folder means you'll never find it to maintain it, and they'll never find it if you actually, and I don't like to do this, give them a view of your backend document library.
Yeah.
So clearly I have
So
no opinion about this.
yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I'm glad you made that delineation between the importance of metadata on the intranet communication sort of sites versus the team sites. Thank you very much. This is a great, great response. I know we're in time right now. If you have time, we can go through a couple more questions. Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah,
So,
people.
folks, if you can stay, great. If you're not able to, I understand. The recording is going to be out there, but if you have questions, keep putting it, and we'll do a few minutes as we have time. So, a question from Carrie. We're beginning a project to convert our existing intranet into SharePoint. What do you think would be a minimum amount of info that we would need to have in place prior to launch? Example, one department or everything or something else?
That is a fantastic question. So here's the thing. If you wait until you're all ready, you'll probably never launch. And so I think it's good. So part of what you're doing when you're moving to SharePoint Online and creating a modern intranet is really showing people the art of the possible. And 2 things are really needed in order to get there. One is you need people who know what they're doing to help you. And I really think that's critically important. Or you need to spend some time learning how to do it the right way. So, it's always cheaper and easier to do it right the first time than to have to redo anything. So you need that, you need some help. And then I think you need to figure out what department or what couple of departments will best demonstrate to everybody else the art of the possible. So I usually look for who's ready, who's got content ready to go, and who's got content that everybody needs, because that will give you a really nice start of your journey. So I always like to see a home page. Home page is a little challenging because if you want to pull in news from all the departments, it'll be a little challenging if you don't have all the departments online. But corporate news on the home page, some experiences, the me experiences on the home page, and a couple critical departments. And then, your navigation, I've done this with many clients, your navigation can link back to your on-prem intranet. And as long as you're connected, it's going to be a problem because you probably need VPN for your on-prem intranet, and you can go to the cloud and get all the Microsoft 365 stuff. But again, depending on how people are going to experience it, I don't think you have to have everything done. I think you need to look at, from a business impact perspective, how can we make an impact in the shortest amount of time to get people on board to the level of change that we'll have to go through as an organization to go the rest of the way, to get that commitment. So don't wait to be done. Choose your, MVP, and that's going to be different from each organization. But I use 2 criteria actually, multiple criteria actually. Do I have a department that's engaged and has content, and is the time and energy and interest to work with me? You cannot build an intranet for anybody. You can only do it with. So if they want to just sit back and have the BA or the IT team do it, that is not going to work. So that doesn't count. So they have to be willing and interested and engaged, because together, oh my God, we can create magic. By myself, I'm good, I'm not that good. I can't get in your head. So I want a partner that's engaged. I want a problem that many people, maybe not all, but a significant portion of the organization can relate to. And I want the main part of it to be doable in a relatively short amount of time. Because if this is going to be a year to create anything that anyone will get any value from, I'd probably pick a different initial project. I'd like a 90-day win, to be honest with you. So you're going to choose your initial projects carefully that meet those criteria so that you can get people saying, I call this the when Harry met Sally adoption approach, I'll have what they're having.
Awesome analogy. All right, I'll throw this last question out there, and then we'll wrap up here. This question by Kirsten. Can hub sites be useful if organization is not using groups?
Hub sites and groups have nothing to do with each other, to be honest with you. Hub is a construct that is applied to a site. I actually think this is how I think of it in my limited technology brain. A hub is a superpower that you can give to either a modern team site or, and most often, a communication site. So mostly your intranet is built on communication sites. That's the type of construct in SharePoint that you will use. You will be mostly hubifying communication sites. So Office 365 groups are part of what manages the membership of a team collaboration space. So you can kind of disconnect them. You don't have to be using groups, because one of the things that modern communication sites leverage for permissions is actually the classic SharePoint group. So I hope I said that right, Asif, right?
I think so, yeah.
Depending on what you mean by the G word, if you mean what is now going to be called Microsoft 365 groups, you don't need, they don't necessarily have to have anything to do with one another, but they can.
But they can, yeah. Excellent stuff. Thanks again, Sue. The information for Sue is right there on the slide. Please do get in touch with her to check out her website. She does events all over the place, although right now she's doing a lot of events from home, but I'm sure you'll get to see her again in person. 3 a day. Oh, wow.
3 just today, not 3 every day, 3 today.
3 just today. Well, thanks so much for being with us. This has been great.
Thanks
And
for
folks,
having
you'll
me.
see yeah, absolutely. You'll see the recording for this. Let us know if there's other topics that you have in mind that you want to hear about, and we'll try our best to make it happen. All right, take care, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.